fought twice. From within and from without. Empires are threatened. Cities besieged. Out of the gloom, an exiled warrior finds a chance to reclaim glory. Before the eyes of the world, the renegade becomes the hero. As kings fall, warriors rise. All wars are fought twice. First in the mind and then on the battlefield. A new unity is forged.
Welcome back. Now, with what you've seen, you can agree, well, you may not, but that gone are the days when African animation were of images that didn't particularly sit very well, or they didn't define the African very well, or they didn't define the image that you wanted to see very well. That is sophistication at its best. And we have joining us on the program the man responsible, Mr. Ferdinand Adimefe, is the CEO, Magic Carpet Studios. It's very nice to have you on the program.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. Amazing work that you're doing, you. With animation.
We're all children. I
like that.
Yeah. So when we started this conversation, one of the first things that came to my mind was Chimamanda Adichie's amazing speech on the danger of a single story. And you talked about Voltron. Those were the things that we grew up on, but the younger generation now have the opportunity to grow up on our own legends as well, which are no less authentic. But talk to us about, the strength of selling our own legends through animation. What's the potential for it to, go far? Yeah, as those ones that we grew up on, went far and even crept into our growing up years.
I actually think that potential is very huge. I would like to think that the way we had the Industrial Revolution and the tech revolution, we're going to have a story revolution. The idea of the story revolution is that story isn't just something you consume, it's something you export. And if you look across the world now, and I oftentimes will tell my colleagues at the office that stories from the West have been explored to the very fullest, right? Whether it's the Nok or the Greek mythology, they've done an extensive work on it. And much of what they're doing now is pretty much repackaging and taking different angles of the same story. Here in Africa, we have stories, right? I mean, if you look to our folk tales, our fairy tales, our myth and our mythology, even our literature. So one of the projects we're working on is a book adaptation by Super Eloquency, which is a feature film and hopefully will be out this year. And then we are creating one that is a sort of like a collection of the African legends. But the challenge we had was they were not all on the same timelines, right? So you have to work around the technology of finding the way of bringing all of those characters, their unique abilities. And the story that the proverbs, the African proverbs, that until the lions learn to tell their stories, the hunters will do the telling. And when the hunters tell their stories, it's their own way of telling the story. So I really think that the potential, we must see storytelling as an economy, not just as an art. And we have to find a way to structure from the policy side to the funding area to the development in terms of the capacity building, the talents that can funnel into this industry. Currently, we don't have that much of a structure. When it comes to the people that would, the university universities, there is not a lot of animators because universities don't have that in curriculum. But when you look at around the funding, animation is essentially an IP, intellectual property, and the Nigerian laws are very weak in recognizing IPs as things you can collateralize. So if you show up with a good story in America, you have a funding. You can make your movie in a year, and you're in the market and you're making your money. In Nigeria, you won't be. It's not going to fly because the institutions don't necessarily think that an IP is bankable, right? So it's still a conversation. I think for us to open the creative economy in any administration, IP laws have to be strengthened to see IP as a real estate. It's a digital real estate, but it's no less a real estate, and it must carry that value because you have merchandise that can come out of it. I mean, a company like Disney, they make a lot of money from merch as much as they do from their film. One movie can change an entire outlook of a generation, and I think for me, I'm very privileged. I have 2 other co-founders and a large team of 60 people working across different projects, and I'm very excited because I love telling stories and I love to build worlds and try to get people to see different sides of what it means. But I'm very passionate about Africa. I feel like the Africa that we know have always been the Africans, the colonized Africa, the Africa we see through the lens of the men who wanted us to constantly depend on aid to survive. But what if we come from the perspective of not seeing Africa as a colonized continent? What if Africa was the colonizer? What about if we colonize the world? And we're doing that with Afrobeat. We're seeing the Afrobeat go around the world. And I would say back in the day, if you were growing up in my day, you had to westernize to be able to globalize, right? You had to sound like Tupac or Biggie. Now, it's literally every foreign artist is looking to a Nigerian artist to collaborate with. So we're seeing that Africa is the new global. And I think it's not just going to happen in music. We're going to see that thread percolate even in movies as well.
Lots of points you've made. You've dropped lots of nuggets. There was one you said that a movie can change the outlook of a generation. So I'll be fair with you. I don't know who's more excited about this conversation. Is it ourselves or our director? Because he's a big fan of animation and comics and the rest. And, before this, he was asking that the name of your studio, is it got from Aladdin and the 40 Thieves and all of that? Maybe you want to answer that. But everybody watching right now, they've seen the Legends of Bulan, the teaser which we played just before we came up. You said you have lots of projects you're working on, an adaptation of Seprane Quincy's book. Which one particularly? The
Passport of Malam Ilya.
Whoa, a lot of people who read that in secondary school will be looking forward to that.
Did you read that?
The Passport of Malam Ilya.
Or you read something more recent?
It's very Prince of Egypt-ish. You have the war, the fighting.
And this is the legend of Bulan,
yes.
Right there. We'll also see the...
And Bulan is actually gotten from the name Akebulan. Akebulan is the name of Africa before it was called Africa. So we didn't want it to be a lot of words, so we just took the Bulan part so it could travel. But it's tribute to the fact that Africa was a place and had 1,000 years of pre-colonial history, right, that has not really been explored.
Amazing.
Amazing.
That's a lot of research.
Absolutely.
A whole
lot
of research.
The making of some of these brilliant works. But I just want to sound like a fan. I want to watch these materials. This, I don't know when it will come out. Where would I watch it? I really want to soak myself into these stories. I mean, look at the beauty in this animation. Look at the detail.
Let's put it out there. This is made in Nigeria by Nigerians for the world. I needed to put that out.
I want to watch it right now after the show. I want to watch it. So your works that are out there, you can tell us where we can see it, but just walk us through the creative process as well.
So usually we always start with a story. We don't even call ourselves an animation company. We actually say we're an innovation storytelling company. So the idea is, right now the medium we're exploring is animation, but it could be something else in future. It could be virtual reality, it could be augmented reality. So we go where the technology takes us, but the story remains vital. So we always start with what type of stories we want to tell. I feel like I'm very committed to stories that can empower Africans or put Africa on the map. I'm not very interested in stories of broken Africans. I mean, there are realities, I won't even deny that, but people are doing a good job already telling those stories, and the news is doing a lot in exploring that. But I want to create an Africa that can really, really inspire Africans around the world to see other parts of ourselves. I think we have a very strong sense of royalty. So for us as a studio, we have a story session. We do that every Friday, something we call Meraki. And Meraki is really like, we just sit and we just let the story fly. We always feel that sometimes stories exist and they're looking for conduits to come out, right? Where they just sort of present themselves. So there's that perspective we have about stories where we don't force a story presents itself, but we start with the story. And after the story, we start to explore. We do a lot of research. I mean, the Passport of Manaphilia, we spent about, we went to Kano for quite a while. We had a team in Kano who went to the train scene. Every place mentioned in the book, we went there. So we have a 40-minute documentary that is on YouTube about the journey to the script. That's not even the script. It's the journey to the script. It's expensive. It takes time. But
I'd like to watch that already.
Yes. I think the link should be there.
So this is which one?
This is actually a montage, right? This is just the guide. This is the flight of imagination. Now, we were all very inspired.
This is magic carpet.
Yes.
Question.
So interestingly, we're actually exploring one of the names that could remotely sound Africa and all those other stuff, but one of my co-founders felt we should tap into what it is. The unique thing about animation is magical. And so we just settled for the word magic. It was the way you felt when you watched something, transporting you to a world that just didn't exist in the time and space.
We could keep you here for another 1 hour, but let's get back to what is of concern. You talked about bankability of IPs and all of that and the challenge. And I know that if you look at government sometimes or look at investment, they'll look at, first and foremost, is it solving a problem? Is it generating revenue? Is it creating jobs and all of that? So I'm concerned about how you think or your proposal as to how to generate critical mass in terms of consumption for this kind of movie, because we grew up on Tom and Jerry and others and all of that. We still go to the cinemas to see some animated movies. What do you think can be done for animated movies to gain that critical mass so that when you say, I did a 500 million or a 1 billion like Funke Akindele in a real feature, the bank can look at you and say, okay, we can give you this money to go and produce something that can hit us 10 million?
So the first thing for me would be to educate our policy makers and those in custodians of funds of the potential of animation. Okay. All over the world, animation grosses way more than live action. If you check the top 10 all-time gross movies of every time, right? Animation is always sitting almost 70% of that bucket. So animation is actually
are you serious?
If you do the numbers, animation is ridiculously huge in terms of revenue.
Avatar? Is Avatar an animation or
Avatar, yes. Avatar can see but I think there are even
is
more...
Is it hybrid or something?
So there are even pure animation movies by Disney. They're always in their billion range.
Toy Story?
Yeah, Toy Story. If you look at Pixar and even Disney, Lion King, they all cross the margins.
And I love one called Poco.
Yeah, they are huge. Now, the only reason why we don't necessarily think it's that way is because animation requires patient capital. And patient talent. So in Nigeria, you don't have capital that will sit with you for 3 years when you're making a movie, because I can go to Nollywood and I'm done in a month. I have a movie in 6 months. Animation requires a different approach, right? So it's important to have an education that this potential is huge, but it requires attention to detail, right? It requires that you back it. It's hugely an export. If you do animation and want to focus on Nigerian market, you won't break even. It's going to be a struggle because of the size of the cinemas, right? But if you go outside of the country, Asia, they've cracked it. If you look at places like Japan, South Korea, if you know about anime is a huge export now because a country decided to own their story, their format, their style, make it their own and bank it. So we need to educate our policy. We need funding that can allow for studios to scale without having to bleed, right? So in a place like UK, animation is considered a cultural and historical heritage. So they use that as part of what they bank and fund for cultural capital to bring the country to a place of prominence, right? So we must see it as something that can even rebrand Nigeria and reposition our perspective about ourselves.
So it's seen more as a national treasure.
It is much more than that, right? It's a national treasure, but I see it as a business, right? Very strongly, because I was in oil and gas for 5 years before transitioning into this. And it's passion. I mean, I have guys who we will always, it's a calling, it's very deep and abiding for us. So I think as a country, we need to get the policy side right, the funding right, and capacity building is an issue. So we need to find a way to bring curriculum that can allow for schools to funnel talent into the industry. The talent leans heavily towards art. So you don't always find business executives that understand animation. You don't find VC funds that understand animation. Everything is tech-led and is more around the fintech space. Those ones have cracked it. I mean, 10 years ago, we didn't have fintech, right? But it took companies to come into that space and innovate to bring that fintech fintech. So we are doing that. We want to create an industry, not just a studio. So it's also very collaborative. You can have the impact of job creation from animation is huge. If you go to India, they have industrial animation farms where you have 5,000 people working in different assembly places. It's almost like a factory. People are churning characters, cutting sounds, and mixing everything, right? So if we want to solve unemployment problems, animation is very critical to that. Sure. But our lack of understanding has not allowed us to pay emphasis on how it can be used for that. So it's going to take a bit of time, but we're there, right? I mean, in my studio, we have about 60 people, and we need more, right? You're looking for people that can...
How do you fund that?
So we're a hybrid studio. We do jobs. We take jobs. We work for Cartoon Network on Garbage Boy. We work for Triggerfish. We work for foreign companies, a few of them. And so we do that, and then we have to put on our own production. We also have been fortunate enough to raise a bit of capital. It's not the size and scale that we want as a studio, but it's significant enough to get the lights on. I mean, we have a season that is a series that is likely to get on Amazon or Netflix before the first half of the year, right? And it's called Meet the Igwes, which is a tribute to African families. We feel like we have so much comedy in the African family that the world needs to see. Whether you watch it, whether it's the Simpsons you're seeing or Bone Talks, like you touch the African comedy, you don't stop laughing. And we think there is something there to share with the rest of the world. Then the series, the feature film comes in much later in the year.
Meet the Igwes.
Yes, Meet the Igwes.
I don't like the sound of that.
Yeah. So there's a value chain involved in this. But beyond the value chain, you have talked a lot about the export potential. But what about the home potential of it as well? When you think about education, I keep referring to how we grew up on Voltron, Fraggle Rock, where we have our own stories. How can we deploy animation to tell stories, to educate our children at the elementary level, such that it can also be lucrative for your business and other types of businesses?
It's actually very exciting. I think that place, I know quite a number of companies who are exploring that. We have projects that is focused on the kids market and for education. The challenge again is distribution. How do you get it to the people? Are they going to be able to subscribe to pay for it? If I go to YouTube to run my numbers, I need to run at least for 2-3 years to get to revenue. But really, the potential for education is really, really very huge. I mean, in our own time, we have kids that have been raised white, right? Sorry about that, right? But literally, the younger kids are watching everything from whether it's all of the content they consume. Right? They all come from other parts of the world. And I think we owe it to them to create stories that can help them feel themselves, see themselves, and be themselves, even in a world that gives them ideas of how to be, right? To share our culture with the rest of the world. Animation is non-negotiable in that. I think it's very paramount. It can help. The limitation, again, would be capital. But I know a lot of creators who are trying to explore educational content. Like I said, what we need is a national policy to help unlock the potential in the industry. And then that's going to be the major key point here.
So we're looking at the teaser for The Passport of Malam.
Yes. This is 4 years old though. Right, so we've been on this movie for about 4 years. Even before COVID, we were doing our research and playing around characters.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's really, really phenomenal because I think for us, we're aiming for an Oscar with this. It's really an artistic masterpiece.
Yeah.
We're aiming for an Oscar.
Yes, we just started our WeFunder, a completion fund of about $500,000 to complete it before the end of the year on WeFunder. An interesting aspect of this is that it's going to be a bit of music, right? To explore the Northern culture, the fashion. This was Imperial Kano, right? Yeah. It was really, really an empire. It was a melting pot of culture back in 19th century. But it's a love story and a romantic thriller, which is really...
If our producer can put it up for us. Oh, okay. Maybe it's a very short one.
What travel. So this is just a teaser.
Yeah. It's just a teaser. So the only thing we see is that
it was written by Cyprian Equensi, someone from the East.
Yes, and his kids are very supportive, helping us see that we bring it out. Yeah.
And I want you to talk us through and maybe start from the beginning itself. By the way, it's good to have you again. You're actually family because you've also been a part of us.
I was on Robin Minds for 2 years.
Exactly.
Oh, really? Hosting it?
Yes.
Oh, right.
So his family. Right. So walk us through, because a lot of young people out there who can sketch, who can draw amazing stuff, but they are looking for a way to just connect it and just maybe become like this in the coming years. They're very talented, some with maybe tech, with the softwares, but they need to be a part of that ecosystem properly or just be basically scale up. So how can you scale up from holding a pencil to producing amazing work?
So the first thing first is to understand that there are different styles. So you have to find a person to identify where is your strength. We have 2D animation, which is more hand-drawn. And we have the variation, which is called the 2D cutout, which is halfway there, halfway here. When we have the 3D, right? Now, across each of this, you have other aspects. You have concept artists and background artists. They do backgrounds and they do concept, but they don't necessarily animate, but they're essential to the value chain. We have character designers. Those ones just specialize in crafting the face, the look and the feel, the texture. So they are character experts, right? But they're not necessarily animators. So we use that animation as a broad spectrum to cover everybody else. But that's actually what it is. So you have to identify that. Now, there is also storyboard artists. Before you begin your animation, you have to have the storyboard. The storyboard and the animatics, they are sort of like rough sketch of giving you an idea. And the reality of it, if you want to reduce your iterations, you have to get the storyboard right. The storyboard is actually an essential part of the story. So you take the script to the storyboard and the animatics. And after the animatics, you take it to the animation process, right? And the animation, it depends on the software you're using or the style you want to go. If it's Maya, Toon Boom, or Adobe Animate, there are different styles, right, that you want to use for that. Then once you're done with your animation process, there's post-production. And post-production involves sound and Foley, and so that's pretty much audio. And there's also composition now where you're having to, do the refinements and all of those things. So it's really, really an entire process, but there are different people operating. Every once in a while you find multidisciplinary people who tend to just sort of function across the value chain. But for the most part, people specialize. And for every project or every film, you might need like 100. Right, people working on it, yes.
No, really?
And you could have 10 character artists, background artists, concept illustrators, you have the animators, you have the sound people. Like, it's really a job, how do I call it?
Okay, there's a lot to call. I'm saying this is what Ego
Yibo. So
if our producer, maybe we can get the sound of this. Can we just roll it back, producer? If we can get, do we have a sound from it?
Okay, we can just enjoy the images.
I wish we had a sound from this, because when we're talking about what you're saying, it is better energized and interpreted when you can see the work and all of this. So maybe we'll make do with this subtitle, but I guess it's a very exciting one. So it's your bride price import duty, or are you?
So this was actually during the dollar scarcity period, and we did this. This was also in partnership with Pulse. Yeah. So it was just a comical skit. So, we just wanted to put something out there.
Because we need all of this, these social issues. Now, I wanted to come in, Bukola, just in terms of, as we continue to explore and export, we need to look at cultural buffers. Are you thinking of helping with cultural buffers? By that I mean, we see infiltrations of things that are not quite African, and that has become a conversation. It didn't used to be, but now we are beginning to see it around us, and there's a for and against. So is your studio or people within that space also looking at preserving our heritage without necessarily denying anyone of their freedom of expression or affiliation?
Well, I think for us, we are Africans, we come from authenticity. And that authenticity is actually interestingly not exactly one way. If I come with a Yoruba story, I have to recognize the moral culture and respect that in how we tell that story. And I think for us, it's really about sharing who we are, and it's less about an agenda to impose or undermine, but just the beauty of what it is, that this is who we are, and that we don't apologize for being who we are. We're not having to compensate that we are lacking in some ways, right? And I think Africa is not inferior. Some people will tell you, and it's really sad, because if you want to go to a streaming platform to sell your content, they'll just take off a zero from it if you're black. I mean,
what does that mean?
Maybe to acquire content maybe from the US, they could get like maybe 20 million. In Africa, you can maybe get it for 2 million. But the quality of the work is really the same. What? The amount of time that goes into it, but it's because the Africans don't have the capacity, they don't have the platform. So at the end of the day, every metrics is not in your favor, and there is just that back end story that if it's coming from Africa, it has to be cheap. If it's coming from Africa, it has to just somehow be inferior. But Africans are not inferior; we're unique. And I think we have to really, really come to a point where we can make a case that African creativity, it's pure, it's beautiful, and it's not supposed to be sort of reduced because of the location of production. It has to be, like what we're doing here, interestingly, yes, the cost of production is cheaper in Africa, but it's art in itself. The value of art has nothing to do with where it's made, but the very perception and the quality that it comes to life with.
Just as a quick follow-up to Jeff's question, if perhaps you got the opportunity of funding from, the West, and you didn't have those cultural variations that reflects what they term as inclusivity, would you be under pressure to change your approach from what is authentically African?
Now, to say this on camera, I haven't said this anywhere else. When we started the Passport of Madam Ilia, we had an offer. And we had two very solid offers. One of them was even a stream platform, but they wanted to take the story. And they wanted to tell the story, but not from here. There was a way they wanted the story to feel, right? And it was going very contrary to what the story was in the book, right? And it was so, that was a tension we had to pass. For me at the time, we needed money. So walking away from it wasn't something that was easy. And it's still painful, and sometimes you don't know whether you did right. You don't know whether you did right, because the periods don't last around here. After being an idealist for so long, you just realize that, oh my God, I need to survive, right? But at the end of the day, I think that there are some sacrifices that are not worth it, because you lose the entirety of who you are.
That's what I was talking about, cultural buffers.
And at the end of the day, you're back at one. I mean, people are telling African stories, but from a colonized lens. Right, Lion King was an African story, but was not told by Africans. But it's a beautiful story, right? If it was given to, I think The Color Purple was being done by this, the second retake of The Color Purple is done by this Ghanaian director, and everyone is saying this is unique because there is a way that you're coming from who you are, right? So I really think, I really think that our kids are being colonized with content, and if we don't have our own content, we have lost the war. You understand? We might win a battle, but we lose the war. So it's important for us to support how that content is produced, right? Most of the Nigerian kids today are being raised by nannies and media. Parents have to work. The bills are high. Lagos is not cheap, right? So, a parent will come back at home, your son has an entire worldview for which you don't know, right? And parents just assume animation is for kids. Watch, not so fast. Because some animation are adult animation, right? They just look like they're for kids, right? So there are some things that parents don't pay attention to. So we need to give parents alternative.
All I hear a lot of subliminal influences.
Absolutely.
And it's really tricky because that threshold looks like you can't catch it, but it's sinking and condensing.
Taking over already, but just quickly, where can we watch your content? Because I asked earlier, is there any content out there that we can watch?
So we have a lot of content on our YouTube channel because those are the free ones. But for the ones we're making to sell to stream platform, you'll find them on stream platform. But I can't tell you when they get there. But at least we have at least 2 projects ready for streaming this year. That'll be out there. Midi Grace is on YouTube. Legends of Bulan, the proof of concept is on YouTube. Our 2 short films, SIP was battling addiction because we feel like the mental health was a mental health short film about how creatives deal with mental health.
Gen Zs will like that.
And how to deal with it. Was really much a reflection of our lives, from energy drink to coffee, just to get through the highs of the moment, right? So that's SIP, right? And then there's Super Dad, which has won us several awards, and it's possibly likely to be a series. It's about a stay-at-home dad who's trying to grapple with what his wife has to do.
We have to bring you back.
Those are real social issues that you're incorporating into the work that you're doing.
We have to bring Freddy back.
Nigerians really want to hear. But
absolutely, we have to bring Freddy back.
We have to bring you back.
Freddy is not just an animator; he's also a pastor. He's also a politician.
Jeffrey, that's one aspect that
we won't go there. I just wanted them to know
you are there right now. You are
we'll not go there. We just wanted to highlight that
you had a round table church. I caught that on YouTube recently. But we're going to have to bring you back.
We're going to have to bring you back.
Please. Thank you so much. Mr. Ferdinand Adimefe is the CEO, Magic Carpet Studios. Thank you so much for the amazing work you're doing and for being on the program.
All right, thanks.
And that's our offering for you today. What a conversation. Authentic.
Are we closing?
Yeah.
We're not closing.
We're not closing yet. Okay.
What's going on?
We have a big one.
We have a big one for
There's
a superstar in the building, gentlemen. We'll go
right back.
See what you call Freddy.
You almost messed up. We'll be right back.
Please.